Basmati rice, the king of all rices. Light, fluffy, delicious, and I'm going to show you how to cook it perfectly.
I like rice. Rice is great when you're hungry and you want 2,000 of something.
I've been nominated for the Rice Bucket Challenge.
All right, let's do this thing.
Here we go.
Many historians place the origins of the first domesticated rice species to the Pearl River Valley region in China during the 13th century BC. Rice became a main crop during this time as it provided the greatest yields per area as well as the necessary nutrients to survive. Spreading from China to India and later Africa, rice became a commodity that was largely traded due to the ease in which it was transported, coupled with the length of its life before expiring. In many cases, rice spread as a commodity across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe because it was the easiest and most efficient crop to bring for large armies marching long distances during conquests and crusades. Rice not only moved as a commodity across borders through trade and conquest, but the largest expansion of rice occurred through the spread of knowledge about the cultivation process. This allowed areas outside of Asia to begin to domesticate and cultivate their own local rice species. Over the course of centuries, rice traveled on every major trade route from the Silk Road through Constantinople and across the Sahara.
A brief history of rice in the Low Country. 1685, rice arrives in the South Carolina Low Country. From where, we're not 100% sure, but all evidence points to West Africa. The geography of the Low Country makes it perfect for rice crops to flourish. Venetians, with their knowledge of irrigation, are the first to grow the rice in the colonies. And Native Americans worked the land. Eventually, slaves brought from West Africa take over working the fields. And with that, rice not only becomes the central component of the economy of South Carolina, it also becomes the central ingredient in its cuisine, known as the Carolina Rice Kitchen. The rice of choice was Carolina Gold, coveted worldwide for its superior flavor and texture.
Irrigated ecosystems and lowland areas with high amounts of rain are where the majority of rice production in Southeast Asia takes place. Initially, rice goes through germination, followed by the reproductive phase when the rice begins to ripen. Once the majority of the grains have ripened, the rice is ready. Occasionally, farmers experience over-ripening, which causes their grains to shatter and leaves the rice unusable. Large numbers of farmers are essential to production because rice is highly labor-intensive and requires large quantities of water. Due to the labor-intensive work, rice farming has poor working conditions that result in many workers becoming sick, severely injured, and unable to cover production costs.
And then there's the environment. Can poor farmers continue to feed the world's millions of rice consumers with rice sustainably and safely? History suggests they can. The lessons and successes of the Green Revolution show what can be achieved with good science and give reason for hope.
The biggest producers of rice are mostly Southeastern Asian countries like China, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. This is not to say they are the world's biggest exporters of rice, because the biggest producing countries of rice also happen to be the biggest consuming countries. The world's largest exporters of rice are Thailand, Vietnam, Pakistan, and India. The leading importers of rice vary because the vast majority of rice importation is a result of countries purchasing rice to make up for what their domestic productions lack. Because rice is so sensitive to environmental conditions, requires a large amount of water, and is so labor-intensive, it is difficult to predict the rice yields from year to year. The price of rice is therefore very volatile, and since rice is such a big staple of many Southeasterns' diet, governments have an interest in keeping the rice market stable. The main force governments use to influence the flow and price of rice is the tariff. Rice is one of the most protected food commodities in the world trade, but governmental rice ownings and interferences have declined within recent decades. and rice prices are now much less volatile than before. China has quotas on the money they must earn from rice imports. They have in the past years owned up to 70% of domestic rice production, allowing them to slow domestic production to increase prices and revenues from tariffs. The Chinese impact on the international rice market is profound, as is the power of India, a country whose government actively manipulates the markets through export subsidies, price supports, and grain procurement. The Indian government's subsidies undermine its neighboring markets in Pakistan, Thailand, and Vietnam. By the government paying for Indian rice to be cheaper on both a domestic and international level, it is putting international rice farmers out of business. Subsidies in developed countries are much rarer than in developing ones, and include subsidies for environmentally safe farmers, subsidies to help rebuild farms wrecked by natural disaster. Export subsidies in Western countries are generally no longer in place, and tariffs are used only to protect the market and producers when the economy is bad.
Oh, sticky rice. I love sticky rice. I can do sticky rice all day.
He talks to his sushi?
All the time.
Have you guys had sushi before? We have,
The rice is washed 3 times, leaving it soft but sticky enough to mold.
And this is the most important thing for sushi, because we say the sushi rice is the heart for sushi.
Yes.
Yeah.